Hey, welcome back to Systematic Theology. We just finished looking at Revelation. That's how God reveals himself to us both universally and in general revelation, and particularly in special revelation. So now we're going to start a topic about God, and we're going to ask this question: what is God like? And so we're going to look at kind of two main areas: goodness and greatness of God. So we ask this question: what is God like? So this question kind of falls under what would be considered theology proper. So theology proper is what deals with the attributes of God. So once again, there's no way for the scope of our study to be completely exhaustive of these categories. So we're going to kind of jump in and try as best we can to jump in on a couple topics within theology proper, specifically looking at natural attributes of God and the moral attributes of God. So here's our discussion question for this particular topic is how does your own view of God affect your understanding of God? And I don't want you to I don't want you to give me my answer to that question, but I want you to really think about how your own view of God affects your understanding of God, because I would say that your view of God affects everything that you believe and do. Like the doctrine of God supplies the entire framework within theology and how it's constructed and how our lives are lived. So our understanding of God determines our style of ministry, our philosophy of life. So I really want you to dig deep and to think hard and to share something that's real and tangible in your own life and your own ministry as you answer that question. So don't give me my answer. I want you to give me your answer, but to think really deep and well about that answer and put it up on the discussion board. It's going to be great. I look forward to reading them. So these are our two kind of subcategories: the greatness of God and the goodness of God. So the greatness of God is kind of the natural attributes of God. This is who he is in his nature. He's personal, he's all-powerful, all-knowing, eternal, spirit, omnipresent, unchanging, etc., etc. Erickson, page 289. The goodness of God is kind of the moral attributes. So we shift from natural attributes to moral attributes, and we'll see that in the next video, and we'll discuss those in quite a bit greater detail. So that's kind of framing our subject, our process, our discussion here about what is God like. So natural attributes of God, the greatness of God, and the moral attributes of God, or the goodness of God. So we're going to kind of dive into the conversation about the greatness of God here, and we're going to look at the natural attributes of God. And so I kind of just want to clarify what we mean by the nature of God. So clarifying that, here's a couple things to just kind of remember about the nature of God. These are things that are characteristic of his nature. So the qualities that constitute what God is, the very characteristics of his nature. They're not acts or roles, so they don't refer to what he does or the roles that he plays. They're consistent across the entire Godhead. So Father, Son, and Spirit all possess these natural attributes. So we're not talking about distinctive characteristics of different persons within the Trinity, but they are consistent across the entire Godhead. These are also objective characteristics. They are not conceptions. So they're not our projected conceptions or even misconceptions of who God, but these are objective characterizations, these characteristics. Lastly, they are inseparable from the essence of God, meaning these attributes these attributes of God are his nature. They're not a collection of like fragmentary parts or something in addition to his essence, but these are actually part of who God is. So those are just kind of our ground rules that I just want to make sure that we're on the same page as we jump into this conversation. So first in the natural attributes of God is his spirituality. So I want to look at a couple passages. Again, I would encourage you to download, pause, go back and look at these passages in much greater detail. But I just want to hit a couple. The Gospel of John 1, verse 18. No one has seen God at any time. The only begotten God who is in the bosom of the Father, he explained him. So we're seeing the spirituality of God. John chapter 4. God is spirit, and those who worship him must worship in spirit and truth. Paul writes in 1 Timothy chapter 1, now to the King eternal, immortal, invisible, the only God, be honor and glory forever. He says again in 1 Timothy 6, He who is blessed and only sovereign, the King of kings, the Lord of lords, who alone possesses immortality, dwells in the unapproachable light, whom no man has seen. Right? So just kind of some conclusions about to draw about God and his spirituality. He is spirit. He's not composed of matter, and he does not possess a physical nature. So he doesn't have the limitations of a physical being because of his spirituality. He's not destructible, so he is indestructible. So passages speaking of physical aspects of God are what we would refer to as anthropomorphisms. Sorry, that's a big word. In the Old Testament, we would see theophanies occur. Those are like temporary manifestations of God. But God as a whole, naturally, his natural characteristics is spirit. Next, we see that God is life. Again, just giving you a couple passages in Exodus chapter 3, when Moses sees God in the burning bush, God says to Moses, "I am who I am." And he says, "Thus you shall say to the sons of Israel, I am has sent me." So God's very name, I am, means that he is a living being, right? He is self-existent. He can never not exist. John says in John chapter 5, verse 26, "For just as the Father has life in himself, even so he gave to the Son also to have life in himself." So God has life in himself. His life and existence are not derived, but they are eternal and non-contingent. So God has a different kind of life from every other being. So he's unlike other beings who derive their existence from God. So he does not derive his existence from any external source. So unlike us, God is uncaused. It is his nature to exist. Life is there. He is independent. The continuation of God's existence does not depend on anything outside of himself. So all other beings, we need nourishment and warmth and protection to sustain life. God needs none of these things. See Acts chapter 17, verse 25. Right. So though God is independent, he is not indifferent or aloof or unconcerned. So he acts out of agape rather than out of need. So God is life. See also Hebrews chapter 11, Acts chapter 17, a lot of references about God and life. The third in the natural attributes of God is personality. In Genesis chapter 1, verse 26 in the creation narrative, it says, "Then God said, let us make man in our image according to our likeness." So God is personist. He is personal. He has an image, a physical, spiritual makeup. I know this sounds confusing because we just said that God is spirit and doesn't have things, right? But we see, let us make man in our image. So he has some sort of spiritual, physical makeup. Genesis chapter 3, verse 9, "Then the Lord God called to man, and he says, where are you?" Right? So he's an individual being with a self-consciousness and will. God is capable of feeling, he's capable of choosing, and having a reciprocal relationship with other personal and social beings, aka man, right? Again, in Genesis chapter 3, when God reveals himself to Moses, Exodus chapter 3, he says, "I am who I am." Like this is God's personality is evidenced because God has a name, Yahweh. Right? I am who I am. He says, I will be who I will be. This demonstrates that God is not an abstract or unknowable being or a nameless force. In Hebrew culture, a name had serious significance. This is not simply a label to distinguish one person from another, but it was an embodiment of the whole person bearing that name. Western culture is very different. We just name our kids whatever we think sounds cute or good or rhymes or whatever. But in Hebrew culture, man, to have a name was the embodiment of personality. So another key to understanding God's personal nature is his activity. He is revealed in Scripture, knowing and communicating with humans. He knows, he feels, he wills, he protects, he provides, he heals, he fights for, he forgives, redeems, reconciles, justifies, like on and on and on. We see God knowing, communicating, interacting with humanity. So there's our third of the natural attributes of God. He has personality. Uh, and I just kind of want to, I added this kind of last minute because I think as we talked about names just a second ago, perhaps the biggest evidence of God is his individuality. Like all of these different names are ascribed to him. Simply put, like we don't name things personally unless we have a personal unless there's a personal component to their being. So just think of some of these names of God: Elohim, like the mighty one, the supreme God, the one true God. Like this is a plural term that is used throughout the Old Testament of God speaking specifically of his majesty or his plenitude. Like God is big, right? Then we have Adonai. I have a bunch of these references underneath. We don't have time to read and list them all, but I would encourage you to look through them and don't just take my word for it. Adonai means Lord or Master, right? It emphasizes his superiority and his right to rule over his domain, his ownership of all that exists. I'm looking at El Elyon, El Shaddai, El Ra, El Olam. We get to Yahweh, which is really kind of referred to as the self-existent one. This is the covenant God of Israel, the I am who I am. This also just declares God's relation and faithfulness to his people, faithful to the covenant that he makes with his people. It stresses that he is active, powerful, and effective rather than just a static, distant, not personal God, right? So this is a personal and very proper name, Yahweh. Yahweh Jireh. We see this in Genesis chapter 22 when Abraham takes Isaac up the mountain and God provides for himself the sacrifice just as Abraham tells Isaac he would do. And what happens is Abraham names that place Yahweh Jireh or Jehovah Jireh, right? The God who provides. We see Yahweh or Jehovah Rapha, the God who heals in Exodus chapter 15. You see Yahweh Nisi or Medeska or Shalom. There's the Yahweh Shema, the God who is present, the Yahweh Sabbath. It just goes on and on and on and on. I would encourage you to do a deep study. The names of God are incredibly important, and they're beautiful. So it's an incredible source of study. But that, to me, again, that just kind of leads and illustrates to God's personality, that he is personal in nature. The fourth of the natural attributes is his infinitude. And what I just mean by that is like he is unlimited, right? And not only is God unlimited, he is unlimitable, right? So he is infinite in space. Look at Acts chapter 17. He's not subject to the limitations of space. This kind of speaks to his immensity, his omnipresence, this question of whereness, like where is God? He just is. Like God brought space and time into being, so he is before space and above space, and he can never ever be limited and localized. And this is really hard for us to understand because when it comes to space, especially, we are obviously very limited in our humanity, and God is not. So we struggle fully understanding and grasping, and that's okay. It's okay. We should look at that and go, wow, like God actually is God. If there wasn't parts of things that we didn't understand, then he wouldn't be God, right? He's also infinite in time. We see this in Jude chapter 25. God is not limited by time, and time does not apply to him in the same way that it applies to us. He created time. You remember all the way back in Genesis chapter 1. There was morning and there was night. Day 1, right? There was morning, there was night. Day 2, there was morning, there was night. Day 3. So God created time. He is the one who always is. He does not grow or develop. There's no variations in his nature. James chapter 1, or different points in it. Like he is aware of everything in a way that we are not, right? He is also infinite in his knowledge. Psalm 147:5. God's understanding is immeasurable. Think about Matthew chapter 10 with the reference to the sparrow. Hebrews chapter 4 verse 13, that nothing is hidden from his sight and everything is laid bare. God's wisdom, meaning he always acts in light of all the facts and all the correct value. He has access to all the information, so his judgments are made wide. Like, we are never like this. God is infinite in knowledge, and so he never has to revise his estimation because of additional knowledge. He knows and sees everything. And lastly, he's infinite in power. Matthew chapter 19, verse 26 is, with men it is impossible, but with God all things are possible. This refers to his omnipotence. He is all-powerful. God is able to do all things, which are proper objects. This is just showing his power. El Shaddai, God is all-powerful. Genesis chapter 17, verses 1 through 20. Right, the problems of Isaac's birth. God's power is just evident. His power is over nature, is control over the course of history, and especially in transforming human beings. He's never frustrated in accomplishing his will. It's amazing, right? Again, there's so much more to this conversation, but I just want you to kind of begin to see that God is infinite in space and time and knowledge and power. And in contrast, we for sure are not. Lastly, of his natural attributes, God's constancy. So Psalm 102, verse 27, but you, God, are the same, right? And your years will not come to an end. James 1, verse 17, everything good and perfect is a gift that comes from above, comes down from the Father of lights, with whom there is no variation or shifting shadow. There's no quantitative change in God. He cannot increase or decrease because he is already perfect, right? There's also no qualitative change in God. He does not undergo modification. He doesn't change his mind or his plans or his actions. And when we enter this conversation, I kind of think about, I ask these, what about the passages where they speak about God changing his mind, right? These are things where we're describing God's actions and feelings in human terms. So maybe a new stage in the working out of God's plan, or the changes in orientation due to man's movement in different relationships with God, but absolutely 100% God is stable, right? He's not static, but he's stable. He's active and dynamic, but stable and constant with his nature. He's dependable. His immutability does not imply a concept of impassibility, where God is just immovable and sterile and incapable of feeling. Rather, he does react and see, but he is still 100% stable. So when we think about the greatness of God, just kind of to put some things together in a systematic formulation, again, to some extent, you're just going to have to trust me on this, because I just gave you a really brief survey rather than a really deep survey. But there haven't really been historically, and I know you're kind of wondering on our historical development, there hasn't been a whole lot of substantive historical developments or arguments. I just kind of want to jump right into the systematic formulation. So first, we see that God's spiritual nature removes limitations of a physical being. So God, which leads to number 2, God lives outside of time and space as we know it. Number 3, God is the giver of life, and he needs nothing to have life himself. Number 4, God's personality conveys his existence, including his self-consciousness, will, feelings, choosings, and relationships. Number 5, God is not only unlimited, but he is also unlimitable. And number 6, God is perfect and complete being. See how we're kind of taking and summarizing these things as we form systematically kind of what the Bible says, and we're trying to gain some summation, synthesizing these truths that we gain. That's kind of how systematic formulation works. So let me give you a couple applications here as we kind of stretch towards application. I just kind of want us to recognize that again, systematically, we've already kind of summarized what's going on, but there's some points of application I think that are really important for us to recognize. First, it's just for us personally, there is something higher than us, right? There will always be a difference between God and human beings. We should, if we can believe and trust that there is a God, we should know that there's going to be something higher than us. We are not God. Secondly, God can work directly or indirectly to accomplish his purpose. So God may use persons or organizations or history or nature or a catastrophe or whatever, right, that are maybe even seem antithetical, right? We see this throughout the Old Testament, where God would use the Assyrians to come in and invoke punishment, right? Or in Acts chapter 2 and 3 and 4, we see, Peter preaching as the day of Pentecost and the Holy Spirit comes, and then this persecution breaks out, and God uses that to scatter the church, right? So God can work directly. He can specifically come in and say, hey, you're not going to do this, or hey, I want you to do this. But he can also use other things that have nothing to do with faith in order to accomplish his purposes. Number 3, we should have an appreciation for God, for all that God has created. I can learn something about God from creation, so enjoy it, steward it well. Don't abuse creation, but we also don't want to worship Mother Earth, if you will, right? So we should have an appreciation for all that God has created and observe it and look at it and study it and let it point us to God. Number 4 here, God is an end in himself. So he is to be treated as a being, not an object or force. It's not just this like Star Wars kind of force that's out there, right? But there is a personal nature to God. He is of value because of what he is in himself, not simply because of what. A couple more as we go here. We see that God's omnipresence, meaning he's always present, right? Nothing can separate me from him at any time for any reason. This is promises we see in the Old Testament given to Joshua. This is Psalm 139 in motion. Nothing can separate me from him at any time for any reason. God's omniscience, his all-knowing. God's omniscience means that I cannot hide anything from him. See Psalm 139 again, right? I cannot fool him. Nothing will ever occur to God. He already knows. So because of that, like, we can pray confidently. We know that God already has all the information. He is infinitely wise. He's not going to grant something that's not good. God's omnipotence, his all-powerful, God's omnipotence means that he is able to do what he has promised, right? And so this, he is able to do everything that he has promised. Last couple, and then we'll be done. God's omnipresence, meaning, again, God's omnipotence, coupled with omniscience and omnipresence, mean that God is in control. Nothing can take control from him. And lastly, God's constancy means that I can depend on God. He is dependable, right? He's not going to fail. He will do just as he promised and fulfill his promises and his commitments. He won't change. I know what I'm dealing with, and I can rely on God. So that wraps up a quick overview again of the first answer to the question, what is God like? So we saw the greatness of God in his natural attributes. And next up, we're going to again jump into the second phase of what is God like. And we're going to focus more on the moral attributes, so the goodness of God.